Smith. I'm an agent of Goldstein. I didn't know it myself. Thought crime is so insidious. It just creeps up on you. My daughter found it out. Very proud of her. Very grateful I've been discovered before it's too late. They won't shoot me, will they, Smith? I know I could be very useful in a labor camp.
Room 101.
No. Please. You don't have to take me there. Why? There's nothing I won't confess. Nothing. I've told you everything already. What is it you want me to know? Take him instead of me. He's the thought criminal. It's him you want.
Hey everybody, back with another popular show with unpopular opinions. It's really neither of those things. One, it's not a popular show because nobody watches it. It's really not that good. And two, the opinions aren't unpopular. They're just presented that way by other people. People who might have an investment in telling everyone else that certain opinions are unpopular. Who are these people that spread this type of information? It's the corporate press. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the corporate press, which is also, in my opinion, the propaganda arm of the United States government. It's kind of funny, some of the things that they do talk about, some of the things that they don't talk about, some of the agendas that they go along with, and how those agendas and things that they go along with change over time, even though those events don't change. One that I always like to bring up as I try to maintain one's own righteousness is the blatant fact that stares you in the face that the media was very against George Bush's, gotta hate being live, don't you? George Bush's wars and being lockstep with the Obama administration. In those same wars, lockstep pushing it. They love it. Obama can't drop enough bombs. Now, here's the thing. I'm not promoting Bush's wars, and I'm not promoting Obama's wars. But I did notice the propaganda wing of the United States government didn't like George's wars, but they did like Obama's wars and Obama's expansion of wars. And they loved the, I think there are $1.9 million Tomahawk missiles that Obama ran out of killing people, right? No big deal. Now let's go past the Obama administration. Let's look at the Trump administration. The de-escalation of war was not encouraged by the press. So you got three shifts now. You got the Bush era, you got the Obama war era, and you got the Trump war era. Now, when Trump talked about pulling out troops, all you heard from the mainstream press was how, hey, that's not good for those people over there that we said you were killing for 8 years. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. I didn't get any sleep last night. Well, I got 5 hours of sleep last night because my wheels were just turning the whole time. And I'm going, should I keep doing this? And as I thought about it, I gave it a lot of thought because I couldn't sleep. What else was I going to do? I realized the motivation to stop telling the truth was fear. And where does that fear come from? Well, I'll tell you where. In the era of East Germany, communist East Germany, 1 in 3 citizens cooperated with the Stasi, which was their kind of secret police, the people who would ruin your lives, or, before they tried to get positive international attention, they would just take you out in the middle of the night and kill you. 1 in 3 citizens were in cooperation with the Stasi. So what did the Stasi make sure happened? Well, they made sure that the press agreed with everything the government wanted, and they made sure that dissent was silenced. Sometimes painfully silenced. Their tools that they used were beyond cruel a lot of the times. But despite this being pretty well known at the time amongst the citizens were so convinced that if they helped the state out, that their lives would be better, that they turned in all their other fellow citizens. Does that sound familiar? It does. Because nowadays, the corporate press says, this is what's happening. If you disagree with what's happening or try to be alternative press and not go along with the official narrative, we're going to ruin your life. Well, they kind of fucked up. And we'll point out why they fucked up in a little bit. I'll also try to watch the language. Because you know what? We need everybody watching. It's very important. Anyway, the corporate press... I mean, I'd like to come up with a fun... The lying press. They're very clever, but every now and then they mess up. But here's the thing. You don't have to catch them on these little details. You can. I mean, you can just watch any news broadcast and go, oh, that's the most biased pro-government thing I've ever seen. It's weird how that pushes agendas that benefit military contractors and big pharma. Hey, look how, remember how big pharma was hated? Remember that? And now big pharma is beloved. Weird. And all the little pro-Stasi people on Twitter and your social media who just do what they're told by the media and their government without question, they're all on board with big pharma now. Isn't it funny how times change? Hey, when's the last time you saw an anti-war protest? Isn't that funny? Yeah, it's almost like the American people are so stupid and so controlled by the government and press that they just do what they're told. It's almost like it's part of some weird plan. The United States, for the first time in history, the people that would consider themselves leftists were more pro-war than people on the right. Now, you think that's an accident? Or do you think that people in this country are manipulated by corporate press because they feel that they can trust it? Now, they feel that they can trust the corporate press because the corporate press and the government tells you you can. In fact, that's the only approved press that the government will allow. Keep in mind, it's still the people that all of our politicians do interviews and stuff with. They wouldn't do interviews with, some alternative press. It's very, very rare. When they want to get the narrative out there, they go to CNN, they go to NBC, they go to Fox, they go to ABC. Why is that? Because the United States government and every bit of information they want to get out there that they need you to hear is put out across what is considered to be approved media outlets. There's no conflict of interest there. Hey, did you know that Twitter put out something about there's Ugandan elections going on, and Twitter goes, "We're going to black out these elections so no, wrong information can get out there." Meanwhile, look at their application of their own platform in the United States. Hell, there's been articles written about Twitter being okay with pedophilia on their site. In fact, maybe I'll pull that up. Give me a second, here in a second, and we'll just show how Twitter doesn't want the President of the United States to tweet because, boy, is he ever going against the narrative. And but they will allow what's called maps. If you don't know what maps are, it's minor attracted persons. Yeah, that's totally fine. Open pedophiles can be on Twitter. Right? That's the side you're on now. Did you know that? Oh, I think Twitter's a private company. They can do whatever they want. Apple's a private company. They can do whatever they want. Google's a private company. They can do whatever they want. Amazon's a private company. They can do whatever they want. They also control the dissemination of information to 3 billion people. So keep thinking that they're good people and they don't want to keep a stranglehold on that, and that the government doesn't know that and also wants to keep a stranglehold on that. Because in the end, if the government controls the political narrative or the media narrative, they control society. How many people have you seen that just type about, hey, did you know that the mainstream media said that the protesters, in one day the protesters were really bad. But they didn't say anything for over 200 days of protest. Now, should it matter what your political affiliation is? Should that change how the news reports on something? Ironically, we're getting, not directly, but indirectly, we're actually getting support from popularized citizen journalists, new media, alternative media, that is saying, no, they should have been there. They should have been filming. Let me get to the Twitter thing real quick so we can move on. I did want to show this. I'm not making this up. This was on... I will have to download it and then pull it up. So we'll do this one. And then I got another one just for good measure. Sorry, I hate not saying anything for like 5 seconds. I know it seems like it throws things off. But I did just want to back up what I was saying. So here we go. I know it's in the, what is it? One of the oldest papers in American history, but it's been discredited by the rest of the papers. But anyway, this is from the New York Post. What Twitter won't censor. So if y'all want to look this up, go to the New York Post and look up what Twitter won't censor. Big tech's purge of hate, quote hate, and parlor pure hypocrisy. So I'm sure you can get a lot of references there. But just to prove a point, let's look up what they do. Twitter allows pedophiles to discuss attraction to minors. And that's putting it very lightly. And the people, by the way, they don't even mind showing their face anymore. You're in such a country now that the people who want to fuck your children, they don't even hide. But conservatives hide. Conservative press hides. All press hides. I mean, all alternative press hides. Why? Because 1 in 3 citizens under East German rule were complicit with the government tyrannical rule. And they would snitch on everybody that didn't go along with the narrative. What does that have to do with pedophiles showing their face on Twitter? They know that the government and big tech and big media is on their side. Either big media won't cover it, big tech will support it, and the government will be silent on it. But what are they very vocal about? Right-wing protest, insurrection. I've seen it called armed surrection. So I guess if somebody had a pocket knife on them now, when they stormed the Capitol, they're armed insurrectionists, domestic terrorists, extremists, whatever. That's all thrown around. But what's not thrown around with the other protesters? Those same words. Despite them burning a large swath of D.C. when they were there. But that's okay. I think that more people on both sides should stay in the streets. Keep protesting. Absolutely. I wouldn't stop now, but what I would do is maybe give some thought to how when the side you feel like you don't agree with does the same thing as you, in a way kind of furthers your agenda and exposes the same things you're exposing about tyranny and things of that nature, and corruption in the government structure, corruption in the justice system. Maybe you shouldn't just turn a blind eye to that and say, no, they can't. We can do that because we're righteous, but they can't. But luckily, in today's article that was published in the LA Times, which we're going to get to now, there were some sympathetic voices, and I don't want those people to accidentally stumble upon the show and go, whoa, I retract what I said, because it's very important that you stay consistent. Very important that you stay consistent. Now, this isn't an attack on anybody. We're going to go ahead and just go through the article and comment on it. But, yeah, there are other popular left-wing citizen journalists that say, no, Murder the Media's journalists had every right to cover that. So let's get into it. Some who stormed the Capitol, including a Proud Boys leader, claim they were citizen journalists. Yes, that is what we're claiming. Let me get this pulled up to where everybody can read it just as well. When the live street, Jesus, starting out great. When the live streamer, known as Dick Nicarlo, entered the U.S. Capitol last week with a mob incited by President Trump, he said he wasn't there to join the insurrection, but to report on the mayhem shaking the nation. So my first little problem with this is they're saying the mob was incited by Trump. Now, my personal take on it is the mob was incited by a tyrannical government who will steal your tax money from you and do whatever the fuck they want, despite being told by the people, we don't want that. Look at Congress's approval rating. That's all sides. Look at their approval rating. They're not very well liked by the American citizens. So you can say that Trump incited this protest is what I call it. You can say Trump incited this protest, but the truth is the government incited this protest by ignoring its citizens. And that's what happens in societies where the citizenry gets fed up. They start to react. You could say the same thing about the Black Lives Matter protests. They said there was a problem in policing, there was a problem in the justice system, and they protested. And the same people that are calling the 6th domestic terrorism and insurrection had only positive things to say about those Black Lives Matter protests. But Nicarlo was treading a blurred line between journalism and activism for a far-right cause. He and colleague Nicholas Oakes were dispatched by Murder the Media, a right-wing company based in Monte Rio, California, that posts video and live streams. Nicarlo donned an MTM shirt and hat. Oakes, host of the Oakes Report, and a leader of the far-right nationalist Proud Boys in Hawaii, wore an MTM badge. They interviewed pro-Trump... They say extremists here. They interviewed pro-Trump extremists and followed them into the Capitol. You're taking some liberties, but that's okay. The two, who view themselves as gonzo journalists in the image of the late Hunter S. Thompson, paused for a photograph in front of a door where someone had scrawled "Murder the Media." They identified themselves as reporters to police who didn't stop them. This is a quote from DeCarlo. One did ask us when we were going to leave, he said later by phone. We said we'll leave when we're done reporting on it, when we've got our scoop. But there was less journalism and more far-right sentiment evident in the video the two men soon posted. Congress stopped the vote when we stormed the Capitol. As we've been saying all day, we came here to stop the steal, says Oakes. We did it. Nicola replied. That's just what I came down here to do. That's what we did. Some mainstream journalists were threatened and beaten by the crowd, but Nicola and Oakes emerged unscathed. Maybe that has something to do with the media not being trusted in this country. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking if you're an asshole bootlegger. You're thinking, well, I don't think that that's appropriate and that should happen and the media is a blah, blah, blah. Okay. Why is the same treatment of the media allowed when it's a left-wing protest? And the media is silent on it because it knows it goes against the narrative that the media needs to push. But I've watched many citizen journalists live stream left-wing protests. And very recently, when those people are caught streaming, they're immediately told to take their cameras down, to stop recording. So it's the same treatment, make no mistake. It's a dangerous thing to be a citizen journalist or a gonzo journalist or somebody recording in these hot zones that the mainstream media won't go into, but they will use our footage. The next day, Oakes was arrested by the FBI on federal charges of unlawful entry into a restricted building. His Twitter account was shut down. Not the pedophiles. Was shut down. Nicola continued to discuss the siege online. This was a fun video. I'm gonna pull this up. Let me pull up the video because this just shows how wacky this entire thing is and the sentiment behind Murder the Media's coverage on it. If you go to YouTube, it pulls right up. They queued it on the LA Times link. You can click this, but it's queued up to the specific point where Dick returns from D.C. Triumphant. Let me see if I can get this full screen. So it might start out loud, but around the corner.
Very close. Someone said.
So they got it queued up.
He's getting closer.
That wasn't him. He's not talking. Oh, and in studio.
Baby, look at this fresh motherfucker. What you had on?
Make way. We heard you. Nobody can hear you right now. Oh no. Very Hunter S. Thompson of him. But oh, what a time. Let's get back to this article. Next day, Oakes was arrested, charged with unlawful entry into a restricted building. His Twitter account was shut down. Nicola continued to discuss the siege online. Have they ever called taking over multiple blocks of American cities a siege, or have they called it righteous anger in an unjust system? Keep in mind, a lot of the people that are doing these taking over of city blocks and stuff, they're not even tax-paying citizens. And I know you're saying, well, how do you know that? Because you're not a tax-paying citizen when you live in a fucking park. All right? I'm sorry, young lady and young men who came from well-to-do households and decided to be a junkie because the world was too boring. They're allowed to just do whatever they want. The government allows it. Their state and local governments allow it. Any left-wing dissent, any left-wing madness, chaos, protest, burning, taking over swaths of American cities and declaring it an autonomous zone, literally insurrection. You've never heard the media say that word ever. They've never said insurrection. Before any of the Washington shit happened, we read the Treason and Sedition Act of the United States here on this show that mentioned insurrection, and it mentioned taking over parts of American cities. It was all against the law. It was all against federal law. But the government never did anything, and the media never said anything about it. They never said insurrection. They never said you can't take over American cities. But one day of Americans being fed up with the government and walking into the house that they pay taxes for, they're domestic terrorists, extremists, insurrectionists. That's your government. That's your government that hates you. Your government hates you. And for whatever reason, and you really need to put a lot of thought into this, they love the other side. Or at least they love not doing anything about it. Why is there no equality when it comes to coverage and prosecution? And I've seen a lot of bootlicking accounts on the left say, well, if that was Black Lives Matter that went in there would be a whole different outcome. No, there wouldn't. You have no evidence to support that. None. Black Lives Matter has taken over zones and called them autonomous zones. There was not that kind of response. You rarely even see talk of prosecution of these people. When Black Lives Matter and leftist organizations make no mistake, protest in the streets, which I think they should do all the time. I think there should be more protests. I want protests everywhere, but I want the right to be able to protest too. And for some reason, the media and the government doesn't. Why is that? But anyway, when the leftist causes are organizing and protesting, maybe, lighting some shit on fire or whatever, the big tech industry and Hollywood have all these mechanisms in place to get them bailed out of jail as fast as possible, and DAs not even prosecute them. Isn't that weird? So all this nonsense online and on Twitter, home of the fucking pedophiles that are protected by Twitter, sponsored by Twitter, to all of them, you're so full of shit when you say something worse would have happened to a leftist protesting in the Capitol. You're absolutely full of shit and you know it. But it doesn't matter. Why don't you defend protesters' rights? Why don't you defend independent media's rights? Because you're a fucking tool of the state. That's all there is to it. For all your talk about how, down with the state and, the American government is so corrupt and the American system is bullshit and it needs to be torn down. For all of that rhetoric, all that violent rhetoric and nonsense, as soon as another side does the same thing and you go, well, I don't politically align with them, you're wanting the fucking FBI arresting them. You're wanting them thrown into the private prison system. You want media to destroy them. You're wanting their lives destroyed. All for doing what you've been doing and just hypothetically, just saying, doing a better job of it. I think you're jealous. But what it comes down to is you are a bootlicking tool of the state. And you can't deny that. You are. You want the state to go after people. You want the same people who you've been protesting against for 200 plus days. You want those exact same people to arrest another protest because you say you didn't agree with what it was about. Well, it was about a tyrannical government, if you ask me. They were protesting voices being unheard. Yet you're more than happy with them being thrown into jail, fined, losing their jobs. You want it to happen. And you'll never quit. It doesn't matter what I'm saying right now, no matter how much sense it makes. You will never understand, realize, or especially accept the fact that you are a useful idiot, tool of the state, and you do not support your own causes. Because you were told not to, and you believe everything you're fucking spoon-fed. Back to the article. Their actions crystallized the often overlapping roles of many, quote, citizen journalists in a world where technology and politics collide in promoting a variety of movements, including Antifa anarchy, white supremacist venom, and marches against racial injustice. What I did was journalism. Follow the events and show people what happened, said Nicarlo, who uses a scrambled version of his name, which he declined to disclose given the crackdown. He said, I'm not doing anything wrong. During last year's rallies, Trump and Black Lives Matter during last year's Trump rallies and Black Lives Matter protests across a polarized America, writers and videographers not aligned with traditional news organizations have emerged as valuable, if partisan, news sources. Cameras are not partisan, ladies and gentlemen. Their Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, and live streams on websites like Twitch and DLive have attracted hundreds of thousands of followers, and they can't afford that. The mainstream media can't afford that. Have attracted hundreds of thousands of followers looking for on-the-ground, up-to-the-minute reporting. Many have used their streams to raise money for causes they cover. Yeah, we've used ours for a legal defense fund that has since been taken down because the left doesn't believe what they actually say. They know this is a tyrannical justice system, hell-bent on destroying the lives of people who expose the system, and they go along with trying to take down fundraising for people who need attorneys to fight against the oppressive system they say exists and needs to be taken down. So you're full of shit again. As the lines have blurred between advocacy, journalism, and activism, this breed of reporter, which has a deep distrust of the mainstream media, has increasingly faced arrest and censorship, culminating in a crackdown after the Capitol siege that left some arrested, others without online platforms. Let's go back and read that, though. Culminating in a crackdown after the Capitol siege. Was that lost on anybody? Oh, the Capitol siege is what culminated in the crackdown. It wasn't anything prior to that. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. It culminated because of the Capitol siege. It's funny how if this was done by Black Lives Matter, it would be called the Capitol protest. As it should be. I'm defending that. But it's not called a protest. But the media and the government, hand in hand, waited for this one individual event to happen before they started calling things sieges. And they go, oh, we need to crack down on this stuff. So your government, when it was them that was being protested directly, is when they decided to do something about it, because they didn't care when it was your business being burned, when it was your stores being looted. They only cared when people walked into what they consider, and it's not, what they consider their building. That's the taxpayers' building, by the way. But that's when the crackdown happened. It didn't happen any time before that. Nothing to see here. Go back to bed, America. Nothing to see here. Just keep believing the media narrative. The attack on the Capitol also raised questions about who is considered a journalist and whether the First Amendment applies when the law is broken. No taxation without representation. Not everyone qualifies as a journalist, said David Hudson. So you need like who gives you your credentials? Do you need that from the government? Does it need to be government approved credentials for you to be a journalist? Interesting. David Hudson said, an assistant law professor at Nashville's Belmont University and a First Amendment fellow at the nonprofit Freedom Forum. Even in the age of citizen journalism and participatory journalism, and no doubt there have been some valuable contributions from citizen journalists, there has to be some limit. Keep in mind, there's no limit on the mainstream media pushing endless wars. There's no limit on that. There's no limit on the mainstream media being complicit in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and thousands of American lives. You need to always be comparing what they're saying with what is also happening at the same time, because it exposes the fallacy of these people being righteous. Go watch all their commercials. It's just pushing big pharma drugs. Their commercials push big pharma. Their programming pushes big military contractors. No conflict of interest. Hudson says the law considers someone a journalist if they're engaged in investigative reporting, gathering news, and have an intent to disseminate such information to the public. Check, check, check. But the law is unclear on where to draw the line between advocacy and reporting. Some courts have found bloggers to be journalists while others haven't. At some point, we need to address who exactly qualifies, he says. I don't think I want to leave that up to you, or your think tank, or a government you can't trust. I don't think I really want to leave that up to these people. These are the violent insurrectionists, just kind of standing there taking pictures. Look how they just destroyed that hallway. All the historical paintings ripped down, the fire in the background. Alyssa Richardson chronicled the evolution of protest coverage last year in her book, Bearing Witness While Black African Americans... Oh, I read that with the wrong inflection. Let's try that again. Bearing Witness While Black African Americans, Smartphone, and the New Protest, #journalism. The very best citizen journalists now have huge followings in their own right, said Richardson, an assistant professor of communication and journalism at USC's Annenberg School. They often have tens of thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok. On the ground, though, they may appear to be indistinguishable from protesters. Interesting verbiage. Richardson said she would recognize those like Nicarla who venture inside the Capitol as journalists, especially if they have established live streams and dedicated channels. Like mainstream counterparts, they work in an increasingly hostile environment where they may be assaulted by police. Do you see people that are on the left that can be honest with themselves? They can be honest. They can be cognizant of how it's more important where even if you don't believe with somebody's politics, you at least agree with their right and that person's need to be a journalist in certain situations. So thank you. Kudos to Alyssa Richardson for understanding the bigger picture, probably better than we do. But if I tell you what, if what I said just now about her gets popularized, she'll be canceled. They'll just go after her. Be like, how can you defend a fucking Trump insurrectionist domestic terrorist? They'll turn on her too. Because they're trained. They're trained by the propaganda wing of the United States government. Citizen journalists have taken on even more of a role as the first responders of the profession, Richardson said, supplying photos and videos that are then contextualized by the mainstream media. This is serious, dangerous work for the unidentified citizen journalist. This is C.J. Halliburton, who is, in my summation, a Antifa sympathizer who claims and is press. While covering Black Lives Matter protests after the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin last fall, C.J. Halliburton live-streamed the shooting of 3 protesters by 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, pausing to render first aid. Rittenhouse has since been charged in connection with the shooting, and Halliburton's footage was submitted as evidence. Halliburton started his live stream, CJTV, to cover Black Lives Matter protests in his hometown of Seattle after the killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police in May. He built a following of about 50,000. More than 5,000 people tuned into CJTV's live coverage of the Capitol riot. Halliburton calls himself an independent journalist, independent live stream journalist, but he's also seen people wearing press badges protesting in Kenosha, Louisville, LA, and Portland, Oregon. Yeah, they do that. And you know what? I'm no longer going to judge who's press and who's not. However, let's be honest, you see people wearing that just so they can get the police in trouble when they like pepper spray them for throwing rocks and bottles at them. Something I don't sympathize with anymore either, by the way. Sorry. I don't care. I don't care. Protest. Go protest. Protest more than you've ever protested before. But just remember, you're very disingenuous while you're doing it, because you're the same people that want the boot on the neck of other American citizens. Because you're a stooge. You're a tool. There's an element of participation that you have to really maintain a fine line on, he says. Every protest wants to claim you as their own. I've made it very clear I'm not on the side. I'm the eyes and ears of the people. Fair. His sister, Shama Bartlett, covered the Capitol rally for CJTV last week, but did not enter the building with protesters. Interviewed. Okay. Let's just... I'm not skipping that because it doesn't fit my narrative. I'm running out of time and I want to get to something that does. Sacramento-based Black Zebra Productions started out as a community storytelling group, but after Floyd's death, it partnered with the Sacramento Bee. Was Sacramento Bee is that the fake one? The one that's like satirical? Or is that another one I'm thinking of? And received 3 press passes. Luckily, they were sanctioned. They got sanctioned press passes from a for-profit news company. Gotta love it. But after Black Zebra posted video of a California Highway Patrol officer restraining a protester with a knee to the neck, its page was temporarily taken down by Facebook. They've also been targeted by police. We haven't been able to stand and record things happening in our community without harassment, violence, and ongoing state repression from multiple law enforcement agencies. Now imagine that and having an entire political-based violent army on top of that attacking you. I wanted to get to something that I think is kind of like the crux of all of this. And it's a very long article, but y'all can read it. It's we'll put it up on the Telegram page. If you're not following Telegram, go to Telegram and type in, search for the channel at Thunderdome TV, no spaces. I don't want to miss it. Okay, I found it. Here we go. Nicarlo, describing himself as, quote, right-leaning, not Republican, libertarian, or a QAnon conspiracy theorist. At times, he's been a Trump critic. He's accustomed to being censored by social media. He says he's on his 4th Twitter account, but resents that law enforcement doesn't recognize what he and Oaks did at the Capitol as journalism. He saw Black Lives Matter activist John Sullivan of Insurgents USA praised by Anderson Cooper on CNN for reporting from the Capitol on his phone. How is he labeled a journalist and Nick Oaks is labeled a terrorist? Exactly. Now, I'm not saying that because I want John Sullivan labeled as a terrorist. John Sullivan recorded the murder of Ashley Babbitt. If CNN would have been in there, maybe they would have, but they weren't. But because of John Sullivan, we've seen the absolute execution of a veteran of the United States who was peacefully protesting. The problem comes into play when John Sullivan is praised by CNN, as CNN calls everyone else there a domestic terrorist, an insurrectionist. You see what's going on here? Nicarlo noted that other mainstream or legacy media were inside the Capitol too, but because they have the right opinions or don't have opinions, they weren't targeted by law enforcement afterwards. And I don't think they will be. And I don't want them to be. You see how I can do that? Nicarlo also resents that social media companies have cracked down on right-wing independent reporters since the Capitol attack, but have not applied the same standards to advocacy journalists covering Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Why don't they call Murder the Media advocacy journalists? We advocate on behalf of the American people against a tyrannical nation. Of course, that's not our main focus. It's just become that in these last few days that things have gotten crazy. A lot of what we do is just fun commentary. We just do shows just discussing whatever. And as a matter of fact, it started out a long time ago, relatively non-political. And then it got political, and we sat back and we go, I'm kind of tired of talking about the same Trump bullshit all the time. People don't really want that all the time. Let's get back to trying to be funny. Of course, we'll keep covering important events and whatnot, as we have. But as we've gotten closer to the election, we've fallen back into becoming political reporters again. Not that we ever fully stopped. But so if you watch the most recent commentary, especially on this show, it's gotten a lot more political again. And that's going to happen in times like these, because at certain times in history, it's important to maintain a good sense of humor, but it's also important to realize what priorities need to be. And right now, your priorities need to be, there's an absolute attack on anything, any dissemination of information that's not sanctioned and approved by big tech, big media, and big government. That's the most important thing right now. Will the left wake up to this? No. No. They're the Marxists. They're the Marxist useful idiots that the government needs. Every victory they think they're getting is just taking away their future freedom. But they'll be okay with that, because they don't mind living under the Stasi until they're living under the Stasi. But then it'll be, well, that's what they wanted. And just like 1 out of 3 citizens in East Germany were sympathetic and information givers to the Stasi, they will be too. Because they believe the propaganda. That's it. They believe the propaganda. So they will live in government-sanctioned filth and squalor and repression, because their news media and their precious government that they tell you right now they can't stand, that'll be what their new God gives them. And they won't turn it away. And they will turn you in for speaking against that power. Because that's how it happens. Oh, I will get back to finishing that article, but I did want to pull up what it was referencing earlier. So let's do that real quick. Hey, Rolling Stone, man. Something different, bro. I don't think she deserved to die. Black activist. Now, this person can be called a political activist and a journalist. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. As a matter of fact, I know they're not. But some people can do the exact same thing and be treated very differently from you. And this is proof of it. And I want you to always remember this going forward, as the prosecutions from the tyrannical state and the private prison system that supposedly the left is against, as they crack down on protesters and journalists, and you won't hear a peep from them. The only thing you'll hear is them trying to destroy your life, job, give your information to the FBI and local police departments. See, they have no consistency. I don't think she deserved to die. A black activist who filmed Ashley Babbitt shooting speaks out. Activist and video journalist. See, it's okay for him to be those things. Now, I'm saying that from the point of view of the media. Oh, he can be those things. Oh, you were on the right. You were considered not to be on the left. So, okay, so yeah, you can't be an activist and a journalist. You can't do that. That's not allowed. Oh, unless you're this guy. Activist and video journalist John Sullivan describes how he captured raw, comprehensive footage of the chaos and violence at the storming of the Capitol. By the way, this is also framed as Ashley Babbitt shooting. If Ashley Babbitt was a black woman, and this was a BLM march or protest, and the officer who shot, well, it doesn't matter the color of the officer. The Rolling Stone would be calling this the murder of Ashley Babbitt. See, it's the little things. They go, we don't lie. What are you talking about? The media doesn't lie. You're an idiot if you don't see how this propaganda works. This is how they demonize and vilify without outright lying. Shooting of Ashley Babbitt. If this was BLM and Ashley Babbitt was a person of color, it would be the murder of Ashley Babbitt by a tyrannical police department, by racist, overzealous cops. Now, the cop was a total piece of shit, in my opinion. But he'll be given a medal. And you won't hear the left and all their anti-cop rhetoric ever say anything negative about the guy that murdered a woman in cold blood. It doesn't fit their narrative. And their narrative is told to them by the government and the media. So anyway, this goes on to say John Sullivan, a.k.a. Jaden X, is a civil rights activist and crowdfunded video journalist. On January 6th, he donned a bulletproof vest. That's illegal, by the way. I don't want this man arrested. I commend this man for what he did. But keep in mind, other people are being prosecuted with felonies for wearing bulletproof vests. CNN is having this guy on live, and they are praising him, as they should, for being a journalist. But CNN calls everybody else a domestic terrorist, but this guy who showed up in body armor, who I don't want prosecuted. I don't want him to get in trouble. He needed that to protect himself because the police were shooting at peaceful protesters. And if you're going to sit here and argue with me about peaceful protesters, again, you're being a disingenuous cunt. Because you've seen what the left and the media calls peaceful protests when they're on that side. They call them just that, peaceful protests. Oh, they're overwhelmingly peaceful. 95% of the people peacefully protested. 5% outrageous chaos and violence does not constitute the entire protest being not peaceful. It far outweighs it. You'll never hear that defense of what happened at the Capitol, despite seeing it. What did I just say? Their lies are clever. Their propaganda is very clever. And it's meant to divide you. Because that's how they keep power. They were never worried about BLM or Antifa, anti-government Marxists. They were never worried about them being able to pull something like this off. Why? Why were they not worried about it? It's almost as if they can control where these people go. If you're in Black Lives Matter, if you're in Antifa, you need to give a really close look at your handlers. A really close look at the people giving out orders, because it almost seems like they're complicit with the government, doesn't it? Maybe you should give it, you won't, because you're a fucking zombie, but maybe you could give it a little bit of thought and think, how could our goal be achieved in one day by people who have no organization, by people who have no history of protesting? How can they pull that off in one day? Because they weren't supposed to. Kind of weird, right? Don't question it. Don't question it. Anyway, I think I'm good for the day. I got it out there. I feel good. Again, check out at Thunderdome TV on Telegram. I got word today that Parler is getting new services and will be back up, and we will be back on there. And maybe they'll kick us off because they cave. They cave to big tech, big government, and big media because they write something negative about them. But let me just say this to the audience. If the only reason you want to stop doing what it is you're doing or supporting what it is you're supporting is because you're fearful of reprisal and repercussions, you should think about that. Because if you stop because they make you afraid, they're never going to stop making you afraid. That's Ville Nomerly